Thank you guys for attending. I'd like to welcome you to attend this webinar. I am recording some of this. Some of it will be recorded and the videos will be shared. Some speakers have asked not me to share the recording, but I will be taking notes and sharing it with as well. So thank you for this. Thank you for attending this webinar on programs for producers, including OFCAP, OFEP, and the PrEP program. In addition, we'll have one of our speakers present on BMPs for producers. Um, First, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Jose Aiken. I'm the manager and extension coordinator of North Peace Applied Research Association. NAPERA does small plot trials, assists with field scale research, and does extension events like these and in-person ones. We are a nonprofit, producer-driven organization led by a board of directors from the County of Northern Lights, and we're based out of Manning, Alberta. As we get started, I would like to note that North Peace Applied Research Association respectfully acknowledges that its office and research farm facilities are situated on Treaty 8 territory, a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples. We honor and acknowledge all of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who call this region home. So, thank you for attending this event. I would like to start immediately getting into it by introducing Kim Barkwell, as she'll be presenting on BMPs for producers. Kim is one of our few program access liaisons, also as PALS, for the Resilient Agriculture Landscape Program in Alberta. As RELP PAL, Kim supported producers with applications and provides outreach and extension related to the program. In her role as a Sustainable Agriculture Coordinator, Kim has over 12 years of experience providing extension services to regional producers. As an environmental farm plan technician, Kim also coordinates the Ellis Owikasin Leduc program. My apologies. Thank you, Kim.
Thanks for that intro. I'll just share my screen. There we go. Oh, I've got to get rid of this or I will not be able to see what I'm talking about here. There. Okay, yes, thank you very much. Is this all good? You can see the screen and everything? Okay, good. As mentioned, my name is Kim, and I am a program access liaison for the Resilient Agricultural Landscape Program. We like acronyms, so that it means I am a RELP PAL. I'm going to talk to you this morning about some of the practices that you can do on your farm that can have both a benefit for you and the wider community. So diverse farms support more. If you can build in more diversity and add those beneficial type projects to your farm, it can help you build resiliency. We hear a lot about flood and drought, especially lately. So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about in terms of building resilience. So this slide talks about ecological goods and services. What are they? These are the services that nature can provide people. In the farming community, we're very used to one of the big ones, and that is producing food. Nature provides us with food, but some other things nature provides us with are carbon sequestration, water quality, biodiversity enhancement, that drought and flood resilience, air quality, and soil health. So we can derive these kinds of services from nature. And how do we do that on farms? Well, there are projects often referred to as beneficial management practices that do produce those ecosystem services. So we're going to do a quick overview of some, not all, but some projects that you could do on farm that produce these benefits. First one is riparian area management. So riparian areas are those ribbons of green around natural water bodies. They provide a variety of benefits. All usually on the slides, there are the benefits are listed there. Some benefits of riparian areas are improved water quality, herd health, keeping your animals out of the water, And there's a lot of biodiversity and wildlife habitat in those riparian areas. I believe the statistic is 80% of the wildlife in Alberta utilize a riparian area at some point in their lifetime, and also reducing erosion when you don't have that bare ground around your water bodies. And how do we get those benefits? By using fencing to manage livestock access, providing alternative water sources, leaving a buffer, and at some cases adding a water course crossing. Uh, Another BMP that you can do is rotational grazing, and I think some of the other speakers will be talking a lot more about rotational grazing and how their programs can support you. Basically, it's upping your game in terms of pasture management, applying some of those grazing principles on you see on the screen there. It's quite simply adding more cross fencing and more water sources can help you do that. And some of the benefits you can get is improved soil health. Again, that improving drought resilience and more carbon sequestration. Now, another thing we can do is adding more legumes to forage stands. We're going to learn about programs that can help you do that later on. There's a multitude of benefits that you can get by adding more legumes to your stand, and that's an existing stand already. And there are a wide variety of legumes. We usually think about alfalfa or hear people mention alfalfa, but I would suggest that maybe the people at North Peace Applied Research would be able to give you some insight too on the types of legumes that do well in your area. And a lot of benefits can come from being able to add some more legumes into your stand, including that nitrogen fixation piece, helping you improve your soil health and all those other benefits listed there. Another crop, now we're starting to talk about some cropland BMPs. Um, Another thing that you could do is adding forage back into your annual crop rotation. When I was growing up, there were producers, even though they didn't have livestock, that they always made sure they had forage in their rotation. Well, this is something that you could be considered now too. And there are quite a variety of benefits, including that reduced input piece, reducing inputs such as fertilizer and fuel, if you have those perennials in your rotation. This is a similar type of project, targeting those like marginal areas, places on that on your land that aren't as productive, that maybe drown out. Maybe you have trouble with saline areas. I don't know if that's a problem so much in your area or not, but it is something that could be considered on marginal areas of the land. Again, it can help reduce soil erosion, sedimentation, salinity management, and reduce flood risk if you have those, like on the screen, they're showing that grass waterway that probably in that farmer's field drowns out a lot of years. So that's a way to deal with that. Something to consider. Another project, in this case on this slide, when we're talking intercropping, the definition is 2 annual crops at the same time, and one of those is a pulse. And again, we're getting that nitrogen fixation from the pulse, which should allow you to decrease your inputs. And that's one benefit, one reason people do try intercropping is that input reduction and getting that nitrogen fixation. In some cases, there can be a yield bump. That's another reason people are trying it. From what I understand, it can be, it's just like any practice. It may not work for every farm, but if you start small, give it a try on a few acres, and I also understand it works quite well within livestock operations, right? If you're more of that mixed farm. Take it a step further and go from two crops to three or more, and try cover crop cocktail. Again, include that legume or pulse for the nitrogen benefits, can help reduce soil erosion, decreasing the inputs again, increase soil organic matter, improved weed control, quite a variety of benefits that you can see on the farm. And again, some of these benefits go not just for your farm, but the larger community when we do these types of projects on our land. Tree establishment. Well, I think we're all quite familiar with the benefits we can get from trees. You could think about planting a new shelter belt or widening an existing stand. And there's a wide variety of benefits we get from trees on the landscape. Some producers think about that too, just providing windbreak and shelter for their livestock. And of course, that's snow capture and water retention that we can get from trees. Kind of a fun one, similar to those grass buffers, those marginal areas. Taking it a step further and not just having like a legume or forage in there, I should say, but adding some other species and getting a variety of flowering species that flower at different times to benefit our pollinators. So, along field edges, for example, and then these pollinators may also um, uh, prey on our crop pests. So that's another kind of benefit that you can get from that idea. Finally, this slide is talking about wetland restoration and construction. So I'm located more in central Alberta, that Wetaskiwin Leduc area, and our area is one of those that have seen a lot of wetland loss over the years. And I do talk to producers that, are wondering how they can maybe get more water off their land sometimes. But on the other hand, lately with our dry conditions, I have been talking to more people interested in keeping more water. And there are programs out there that will help you restore previously drained wetlands and even in some cases construct a new wetland. And I have talked to some producers in the last few months that have done those. So it's kind of, to me, that's pretty interesting. And there are a lot of benefits to having those wetlands on our farms for sure. So now, so there was a few examples of things you can do on your farm, some beneficial management practices. And how do you kind of come up with a plan? Where do you start? And one place you could start is by completing an environmental farm plan. It helps identify risks on potential risks and areas for improvement on your farm. It's a voluntary free self-assessment tool. And it can also be a requirement for some government programs. So if once you've got your environmental farm plan done, you're ready, you have one less thing to worry about if you're ready to apply for some of these programs that require it. For example, the RELP program or Resilient Agricultural Landscape program, having an environmental farm plan was a requirement. As an EFP tech, I'm confident to say that it's a simplified process now. If you did one with the big binder years ago, it's easier now, although similar in terms of what you review, very much so. And there's technicians like myself across the province to help with the process. So there's a lot of good reasons to get an environmental farm plan done. RELP pals like myself are still available. The program was very, very popular and is no longer accepting applications. You may be aware of that. However, other pals like myself are there to do our best to answer some questions in terms of implementing the BMPs that you may have applied for, that kind of thing. So we're still out there and also doing outreach like this. Now, these beneficial management practices we that I reviewed, there are some cost. There are some programs that can assist you with that. RELP is no longer taking applications, like I mentioned. However, there are other programs you're going to learn about today. Plus, for some in the province, there is a program called ALICE. I'm a coordinator of ALICE Wetaskiwin Leduc. About a third of municipalities offer the ALICE program and in Alberta, and a lot of the projects I reviewed can be considered by ALICE. And there are, like in your neighbors here, there is an ALICE programs near you, near like NPARA's uh, coverage area. So just give a shout out to ALICE. And I know you're going to learn more about the other programs here coming right up. So that's all I've got. If you have any questions, I don't know if you were wanting to do that now or later on.
No, I think my goal was to do questions after each speaker, and then if there are questions at the end as well. Um, if there are no questions, we will just move on. I know yours is pretty straightforward with BMPs, so it's kind of
Yeah,
just
for sure.
it's a good intro to kind of what everybody else is going to talk about.
Exactly. Okay, I'll stop sharing then. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce our next speaker. That's Quinn. Quinn Hlus. You'll have to correct me if I pronounce your last name wrong there. Quinn will be presenting on our EFP program. Quinn is a researcher program officer with RDAR, Results Driven Agriculture, managing the Producer Research and Evaluation Program, also known as PrEP. She comes from a beef cow calf operation in East Central Alberta and recently achieved her master's degree in soil science in 2024. She's very excited about PrEP and encourages producers to look at opportunities to be innovative in their own operations. Thank you, Quinn.
Thank you, Jose, for the introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your patience as I get set up here. So as Jose said, my name is Quinn Hlus. I'm very excited to be participating in this webinar today to talk about the Producer Research and Evaluation Program. So PrEP for short, this is a new initiative offered by RDAR that we just launched last year, and we're very excited to be able to offer this for producers. So what is PrEP? This is a new initiative under our Accelerating Agricultural Innovations program that exists for producers who identify as being innovative, risk takers, experimenters, etc. So I'll kind of give you, I guess, some background behind the what this program or what this initiative is really for. So it's supporting producers in testing new products, practices, and technologies and offsetting some of those costs associated with that. And with that comes offsetting some of that risk. So as you know, there are so many different products, technologies, and new practices that are coming along in our industry. And it's hard to keep up with them all, and it's hard to know what works, especially when some of these practices or products or technologies may not be tested or required to be tested to prove that they work. So you as the producer are really taking the brunt of that financial risk in testing those products or practices or technologies on your own farm. And so we don't want to discourage you taking those risks, but we want to help you and try to offset some of that financial risk. And that's what this program or this initiative is for. And so the reason that RDAR sort of kind of came along with this initiative is if you're familiar with RDAR, you know that we fund research in the province of Alberta that is very high level, results driven, peer reviewed, and is really generating solutions for producers and meeting them at the farm gate. A little further down the road, ARDAR also offers the On-Farm Climate Action Fund program, and this is where producers can receive funding to offset the costs of implementing beneficial management practices on their farms, including nitrogen management, cover cropping, and rotational grazing. And Christy's going to talk about that here soon as well. But so we sort of identified through these two programs that we offer some very important things. So with research, the research projects that ARDAR supports generate solutions for producers, and present them with potential solutions to issues or ways to advance their practices. Through the off-calf program, we identified that there is a group or population of producers in this province who have implemented those beneficial management practices, and now they're looking for those opportunities to be innovative. So through our research programs, generating those solutions, and through the off-calf program, identifying that group of innovative producers in the province, we developed PREP, the PREP initiative. And this program this initiative is really designed to bridge that gap between research and off-calf, giving producers an opportunity to test emerging practices, products, and technologies that have been identified as potential solutions through that exploratory research before they've been developed as beneficial management practices or established as beneficial management practices. So PREP is bridging that gap between research and off-calf, giving producers the opportunity to be innovative and experimental. So who is eligible for funding under this initiative? So it's Alberta producers, so operating in Alberta, responsible for at least $25,000 of annual income on farm cash receipts. And this does not include landlords whose only interest is ownership of the land. So it's the same eligibility requirements that we've got for off-calf. So through this initiative, you might be thinking of what sort of projects you might be able to do. So some examples, or I guess a high-level overview of some things that might be suitable through this initiative, include testing of emerging practices, technologies, and products. And this can be practices, technologies, and products that are new in general, or just new to us here in the province. So you may have read about something that they're trying out and is working really well, maybe in Europe or in the United States, and you're wondering how that might work here for us in Alberta or even in another province, right? That also goes for adapting or modifying practices or technologies, because we have a lot of regional variability in the province. We know that the conditions for agriculture are very different from the north to the south in this province. So how do practices, products, or technologies need to be modified or adapted to work well where you are? Projects can also look at examining the suitability of these emerging practices, products, or technologies. So what comes along with implementing these new practices, products, or technologies? Do they need to be modified in any sort of way, like we said before? And do they make economic sense to implement on your operation? So I know that's kind of a very high level, and you might still be thinking about, well, how does that work for me? And maybe what are some specific examples? So we did launch this this initiative earlier last year, as I said, and we did have the opportunity to fund some really interesting and very innovative projects. And I'd just like to share a few with you to kind of give you an example or an idea of what some of our producers are up to here in Alberta. So in the North region, we had a producer who looked at the nutritional impacts of harvest timing for various forages. So the goal of his project, so he runs a dairy farm, and the goal of his project was to really see, with his different types of forages that he grows, when is he going to be able to achieve the best nutritional quality in terms of protein, starch content, digestibility, things like that, to obtain the highest milk per ton he possibly can, and how those different forage harvest times will differ to fit into his nutritional program for his dairy cows. So his project is complete now. And he was able to determine harvest or optimum harvest timing for all the different forages that he grew based on the starch and protein content that he was looking specifically to achieve with those different forages. So that project was really interesting and very informative for him. Some producers kind of in central Alberta looking at using Wyoming snow fence. And this is kind of a newer thing for us here in the province. They actually use Wyoming snow fence, I believe, quite a bit in the United States, well, specifically Wyoming. They have some pretty strong winds, and those winds will put so much snow on the highways. So they use these very tall, 8 feet, 12 feet, 10 feet tall wooden fence to keep this highways clear of snow. And the idea was that, well, how could we use those fences instead of keeping snow away from an area to use it to put snow exactly where we want it? And that for these producers was in their dugout. So the past few years with the drought conditions we've been experiencing, these producers have been having to haul water to their cattle every day, which is extremely expensive and very time consuming. So how can we fill up their dugouts with a minimum sort of effort and hopefully not a big cost? And so we looked into these Wyoming snow fences, and so the producers were able to get some snow fence built and put out kind of midwinter this year. We don't have results yet from that project complete, but from what we can see, the snow fences were effectively helping them collect more snow than they would in a normal year. And it's also going to have hopefully a result on their dugout water quality. If they can improve and increase the amount of water that they've got in their dugouts, then that should hopefully also help to improve water quality. So that's going to be really interesting when we get those results this spring. Another producer looking at using two different soil pH products. So he's comparing sugar beet juice as well as cement kiln dust to see which of those products is more effective at increasing his acidic soil pH. So he's struggling with yields and unproductive soils with a very low pH. So he's not only looking to see which one of those products may be more effective at raising his soil pH, but also which one of them may have a bigger impact on crop yields. And then producers kind of in my home country in east central Alberta looking at using sex sorted semen and artificial insemination to improve their production economics in their beef herd. So they've determined that tan steer calves do the best at market. So they want those tan steer calves. And it's really a toss-up with your traditional breeding program with a Charolais bull and your Simmental cow. If you're going to get a tan steer, a tan heifer, a red steer, red heifer, whatever you may get. And so they want to take the guesswork out of it to determine or to get exactly the numbers that they've determined is the most productive for their beef herd. So they're using male sorted Charolais semen, which was available for the first time in Canada in 2024, to get the optimum number of steer tan calves that they want for their herd. And they're also looking at using female sorted Simmental semen to obtain the appropriate or I guess optimum number of replacement heifers that they would like for their herd as well. So they're looking at comparing that program with artificial insemination and sex sorted semen, the efficacy as well as the economics of that, comparing to their traditional breeding program, just kicking a bull out in the field. So that project's going to be really interesting results as well to determine how the artificial insemination and sex sorted semen worked for them and what sort of economic payoff or difference in return on investment there was for them. So as you can see, we've got some really innovative producers here in the province, great ideas and all projects that are going to help move them forward on their own operations. So if you're thinking about what sort of a project you could do through this initiative, you're thinking about what sort of components your project needs to have. So we'll go through just kind of an overview of that. The most important thing that your project needs to have is a clear research question and some sort of knowledge or industry gap. So what is the question that you're trying to answer on your farm? Are you looking at, does product A result in a higher yield in my crops than product B? Are you looking at, does practice A result in a higher return on investment for me than practice B? Whatever it may be, you need to have a clear question that you're trying to answer. And that's coming from a knowledge gap in the industry where we don't have a clear answer to that question already, right? Another thing is having those measurable outcomes. And what we mean by measurable outcomes is you're taking soil samples and you're measuring pH or soil nutrients, or you're taking crop yields and comparing them. There needs to be something that you can measure. And the importance behind having those measurable outcomes is that you can therefore definitively determine that there was a difference between whatever you were comparing, whether it's a new practice being compared to your control, what you would normally do, or it's two different products being compared. The only way you will know the difference or that there is a difference between those two things is if you measure the yield, the soil pH, the soil nutrients, whatever it may be, your return on investment. So having those measurable outcomes. We would like to see that you're working with third-party consultant of some kind. And this is fairly flexible in that if you're doing maybe a crop-related project, maybe you reach out to your agronomist or your certified crop advisor. If it's a livestock-related project, perhaps you're consulting your veterinarian. Or if you would like some support with maybe the research setup of your study, maybe you're reaching out to your local applied research association for that support. Whoever it may be, we're just looking that you're working with a consultant to support you in the areas of your project where you feel you most need it. And lastly, we'd like to see that you've got a clear budget and funding request. Needs to be very clear the items that you are requesting funding for, as well as what your financial contribution will be. And I am going to be going over sort of the financial specifications for this initiative in a couple of slides here. I do want to touch briefly on your field project setup, and this is obviously relevant if you're doing a project in the field, less so if you're doing a livestock related study. Those sort of the same principles apply. So here you've got a field where you're going to be completing your study. So say, for example, you're doing a project where you're comparing two different soil applied biological products, okay? So treatment one is biological product one and treatment two is biological product two. You would have a control strip in there where you don't apply any biological product so that not only can you determine any differences in yield or soil characteristics between your two treatments, but also between your treatments and not applying it whatsoever so that you can determine, is there even a benefit to applying these products at all? So in a true field study, the best practice is to do multiple replicates. And this can be overwhelming. I do get it, but it's really, really very simple when you kind of break it down like this. So in a field, you would ideally have at least 3 replicates. So you would consider each strip in each of your one treatments and control as one replicate. And from there, you would do at least 2 more strips of each treatment and control in your field so that you have 3 replicates. And this is so that you can determine that any differences you see or observe between your treatments and your control are a result of they being inherently different from each other in the potential benefits that they're providing, so that you can see those patterns. If treatment 1 did better than treatment 2 in replicate 1 and you only had that one strip in the field, then do you know for sure that treatment 1 was better than treatment 2? If you have multiple replicates, you can observe those patterns. So treatment 1 did better than treatment 2 in all 3 replicates, then you can say fairly confidently that treatment 1 was better than treatment 2, right? So it's just giving you a better understanding of that product. It's giving you better idea and better confidence in your conclusion that you can draw from your study, right? So it's just really giving you more information that you can kind of back up on. And you'll notice that these treatments and controls are in different order in each replicate, and that's what we would call randomization. And sort of the importance of that is just so that any variability that you may have within your field, oh well, and that's comes into play in your replicates as well. Ideally, you're picking a field that is fairly uniform in terms of characteristics, past management history, things like that. And I'll just touch briefly on an example of that. If you said you seeded your treatment, your control, and your treatment too. So let's just go back to here. So this is where you seeded your strips or you applied your products. say where treatment two was a naturally occurring saline area in your field. And naturally, you had lower yields in that treatment area compared to your control in your treatment one. Well, would you draw the conclusion that treatment two was a poor product compared to treatment one? Or would it be because that product had a disadvantage going into the study because you've seeded it in saline area? So that's also the importance when it comes to replication. And the randomization is so that you don't observe any effects between the treatments that would occur repeatedly. So if you always had your control and your treatment next to each other in every study, and there's potentially some sort of overlap or interaction between those, then you might observe some sort of outside influence from your study. So again, it's just sort of a reassurance or more confidence in your study. And I know I know how overwhelming this can be. And certainly your local applied research association is a great resource to get in touch with if you have any questions about a field trial setup. But I won't spend too much time on that. I'll just say that the ideas are pretty much exactly the same, even if you're doing a livestock related project. You still want to have uniformity in your population, just like you would want to have uniformity in your field. You want to have multiple replicates, so multiple animals that you're doing your study on, and you would want to have some sort of a control population. So say, for example, you're doing a project with your lambs and you're looking at using a lytle band compared to just a regular elastrator band, and you want to determine if the lambs that received lytle bands to get their tails docked have higher rates of gain compared to the ones that have regular elastrator bands. So you would have to have a control population of lambs that get the regular elastrator bands compared to the treatment group that gets the lytle bands, right? Same principles. So now we'll get into the funding overview for for prep. So there is $20,000 maximum funding available per project, and this is on a 60% ARDAR grant, 40% producer basis, and that 40% is split up into 20% cash, 20% in kind. So this has recently changed. We're working on updating some of our program guidelines, so please keep an eye out on our website and our guidelines for changes in the next or in the near future. Eligible expenses for this program or for the initiative include sample collection, sample and data collection and analysis. And so this can be costs associated with your agronomist going out to collect samples, getting those samples analyzed in a lab, and even having your agronomist interpret the results for you. And along with that, obviously, third-party service provider fees. So whatever fees your agronomist or your veterinarian is charging for your project for their services is an eligible expense, as well as materials and supplies and equipment rentals directly related to the project. Though please note that we do have a $10,000 maximum on supplies, materials, and equipment rentals related to the project. And this is really just to reiterate that the purpose of the initiative is to offset the costs of testing a new practice product or technology. It is not to provide funding for you to adopt that practice product or technology widespread on your farm, right? So you are interested in prep and you're really excited and you already have a project idea in mind, something that somewhere on your farm that you've identified that you could improve. So what are the steps that you're going to take? First things first is determine your research question. So where on your farm have you identified an area that could be improved? How are you going to go about testing that? So what is your question that you're trying to answer on your farm? Does product A result in a higher yield than product B or whatever it might be? So that's step number one. Step number two is to review our program guidelines to ensure you meet eligibility criteria, to make sure your expenses are eligible. And our program guidelines also have a lot of great information as a resource in setting up your field study. I went over it really sort of briefly in that past slide, but our guidelines have some really good resources for if you are looking at setting up a field study. And as I said, please keep an eye out on our website as we are going to be updating our guidelines and our website in the near future. So next thing, you're going to source your needed third-party expertise. So you're going to call up your agronomist or your veterinarian You're going to pitch them your project idea and you're going to let them know where you could use some support with your project. And sort of from there, you can work with your consultant to put together your research outline and budget for your project. So this is where you're going to figure out how you're going to set up your strips in your field, what your expenses are going to be, what supplies you need, things like that. Once you've got that all figured out and you've got your budget outlined very clearly with quotes wherever possible for project expenses, and you've very clearly outlined the financial contribution you will be making to the project along with your funding request, then you are ready to apply online. And so you can apply online for prep on our ARDAR website. There's a link to our agricultural research grant organizer, I believe is the acronym ARGO. So that's where you apply for prep. It is the same place that you apply for OFCAF if you have applied in the past. I will note that if you have previously applied for OFCAF funding, there is a little workaround that you'll have to do because Argo is funny and it won't let you use your same email. So again, those steps that you need to take if you previously applied for OFCAF are in our guidelines. So you can go to our guidelines to find that workaround process. And if at any point during any of these steps in the process, if you are feeling confused or you have questions or you just need a little bit support, you can always feel free to reach out to me. So you can reach me by emailing prep@ardar.ca or call our main office number and we'll get your message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But that's it for prep, and I'd be happy to take any questions that there might be.
Awesome. Thank you, Quinn. We do have one question in the chat already, from David. And the question is there an ideal number of treatments to have in a test? Can you have too many treatments?
I wouldn't say that there's necessarily an ideal number, but I will say that it can get very complicated and overwhelming very fast. And so you as the producer are the expert in knowing how much time you have to devote to projects and project management. And so when it gets to a field study, it's really you really want to try out as much as you can. It's kind of tough to narrow it down to only a few things, but it really is sometimes better to just start small. If you start with one or two treatments and you have a control, I would say that's a great sized study. From there, whatever your findings are, if you want to expand on them, then there's always an opportunity to have another field study the following year where you maybe incorporate a different treatment. So it's really just a matter of how much time are you able to devote to this and whether or not it can fit within the project budget as well.
Perfect. There's two more questions. Are results made public?
So we are going forward, yes, going to be making results public, though we will be keeping confidentiality in terms of producer names, location, things like that. So
Um, and then is there a certain time of year when applications are open?
we have a continuous intake currently, so you can submit applications anytime. We do not currently have a closing date, so.
And then just a little bit, I know Quinn, you kind of discussed this with me last week. Do you anticipate that acre limitation thing coming up? Do you want
Yeah,
to explain that?
we're working on that in our updated guidelines. So it looks like we are going to be having a 30-acre limit for field projects, so soil and crop or whatever field related project, um, unless very strongly justified for the project needing to be more than 30 acres. So there is a little bit of flexibility in that we can count those 30 acres as just treatment acres. And if you're, having a control in your study, then those acres for your control strips do not need to count towards that 30-acre total. So, but that will be in our updated guidelines coming shortly to our website.
Just thought I'd shout that out there, especially with the treatment question.
Definitely.
If there are no other questions,
Okay.
thank you, Quinn. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I just have to figure out how to, oh, there we go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Sonia Shank of CFGA to present on the OFCAF program. So, Sonia Shank works for the Agriculture Research Extension Council of Alberta, also known as ERICA, as the On-Farm Climate Action Fund provincial partner. The Canadian Forage and Grassland Association is providing implementation dollars for rotational grazing for Alberta producers. CFGA also contributes to extension activities and field days across the province. Sonia, I open the floor to you.
Okay, so I do have a great, I'll go over my presentation and because I didn't practice sharing my screen, I am going to see how we do here. And then we're going to go, you should be seeing it, I assume, in my regular mode. And so I'm going to try presentation and see if it worked. Did that work? Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Jose. So as she mentioned, we are going to be full of lovely acronyms today. As you heard, PREP and PAL and RALP, and we're going to hear a couple more a little bit later. So I am Sonia Shank, and I do work for ERICA, which is the Agricultural Research and Extension Council of Alberta. And I get to wear a couple of different hats with my job, and one of them is the provincial partner with the Canadian Forage and Grassland Association. And as Quinn mentioned, she talked a little bit about the OFCAF program, which is the On-Farm Climate Action Fund. So like I said, ERICA, CFGA, OFCAF, and we're going to run right out of the gate. So you have, I assume, heard a lot about the OFCAF program going forward. I think Christy might get into it a little bit about how OFCAF is. I try to tell producers, think of OFCAF as a giant bucket of money, and there are many organizations out there that have dollars under OFCAF programming. So when you hear about the OFCAF program, each of the different programs have different nuances depending on which one you are looking to apply for. So please keep that in mind, because I generally will get phone calls near closing date and producers will be saying, oh, well, I applied to OFCAF and I didn't get funding. And I always ask, well, do you know which OFCAF program you applied to? Because there are a couple of out there. So as I mentioned, this is kind of a quick overview of my presentation. If you have questions, please don't wait till the end. I'm going to get you to stop and ask me right away, because I know sometimes we tend to forget, and then I get distracted as well and may go off on a completely different tangent. So just to let you know, as I mentioned, there was this big bucket of money that was put out there from the federal government. It was $700 million in 2022 and an additional $300 million renewed in 2024. So there were 13. So when I mentioned there are lots of different OFCAF programs, there were 13 different organizations that are geared to help producers access funding across Canada. So there are some obviously that are not available in Alberta, but then there are some that are available in Alberta under we had 3 different streams originally. So right now we have cover cropping, which I know has been a very there's been a huge uptake for that one. There's nitrogen management and rotational grazing. And the Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association is only looking at the rotational grazing aspect of it. So please keep that in mind, that if you have questions about cover cropping, it may not be funded under CFGA, because we are looking, as Kim had mentioned earlier, for things that look at carbon sequestration and intensive grazing. So as I mentioned here, looking at adopting beneficial management practices that help environmental benefits for biodiversity and soil health. And we are looking at also providing implementation dollars to support the adoption, as well as outreach and education, which Jose mentioned as well. Okay, sorry, I have a second slide in there. So the provincial distribution. So as I mentioned, OFCAF is a national program, and CFGA is one of the programs that is delivering in Alberta. We're also working with the BC Forage Association in Alberta. It's the Agricultural Research and Extension Council of Alberta. Saskatchewan, they don't have a partner organization that they're working with there. And in Quebec, it's the Conseil québécois de plantes fourragères. So you can see that when we're looking at the off-CAF dollars that are available under the Canadian Forage and Grassland Program, it is split across the country. So some of the deliverables that we are held accountable to AAFC, which is Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, who's provided us the funding, is looking at rotational grazing education. So we've created an online course. The activities, as Jose mentioned, with field days, speaker fees, and implementing some grazing clubs. We have mentorship, which is the development and education in terms of one-on-one for producers. And then the last one, which is where a lot of people are interested, is that rotational grazing implementation dollars. As I mentioned, we have an online course that we've developed. It's free of charge to anybody in the province, anybody in the country. You don't have to apply for those CFGA dollars to access this course. You can grab that QR code if you're interested. There's 6 self-directed modules in there that talk about grazing goals, concept planning, looking at issues around extending the grazing season, how to do some record keeping, and the margins of grazing. So that's one piece of the pie that we work on. The second one are these workshops and grazing clubs. So CFGA supports Alberta producers to put together programming that makes sense for them regionally. So we usually will look at one-day events where you can learn about rotational grazing and help to either develop your own plan or look at implementation that has already taken place in the area. And then we also have grazing clubs, which are online or ongoing sessions where groups can regularly connect to learn from their peers. So we have a number of grazing clubs in Southern Alberta. We have 5 set up to date, and we kind of go through a lot of those modules that I talked about that are in the online course, and then also things that are regionally interesting to producers. So in the brown soil zone, we look at native pasture management and getting water out to some of those really large areas, and those may not be as relevant in other parts of the province. Some of the extension activities, as you can see here, these are some of the things that we have been involved in. We have the grazing club on there. There was a drought mitigation one that was done in Maple Creek, and then the BC Online Grazing Club. Earlier this spring in February and March, we had a 5-part small ruminant grazing club that went over really well. We had 140 registrants at each one, and we had questions all the way right up to the end from the small ruminant producers. In terms of provincial support, as I mentioned, the Canadian Forage and Grassland got provincial partners in each of the provinces to help in terms of those education and extension activities. So as you can see, Erica's on there, BC Forage Council, and for Quebec, it's the CQPF. On our website, we have a list of local grazing mentors who are happy to provide one-on-one help for producers if you have questions about rotational grazing or setting up a grazing plan. And then if we do have producers who are interested in becoming mentors and working to help kind of give back some of their knowledge, we have a mentor training as well that goes on throughout the year. So if you're interested in either one of those programs, feel free to send me an email, and I'll provide my email in the chat at the end of my presentation. As I mentioned, we have this one-on-one learning, and one of the social posts that we had that went out kind of at the beginning of January is winter is the perfect time to develop a rotational grazing plan. And we have mentor network that are experienced producers, and they're willing to help new producers with answering questions and developing grazing plans. So they can help you troubleshoot technical issues you might have with your unique grazing plan and property. And there is funding available to support that, which is $1,500 for a producer, and it's cost shared up to $1,500 for the time that the mentors may spend working with you. Grazing plans, as I mentioned, producers can access those mentors for help to develop those grazing plans, and they can do so either using a PAG, a CCA, or a specific grazing mentor from our network. And those applications are reviewed and ranked according to their grazing plan. And keep in mind that the CFGA program, contrary to some of the other programs in Alberta, is not first come, first serve. The application window opened April 1st and will be closing April 30th. And we, as I mentioned, we do rate the applications to ensure that the best projects in Alberta are actually funded. So you may be asking what is available for dollars under those implementation. So I apologize, this should say 2025. The grazing plans, so the development of the grazing plans are eligible, fencing, water systems, and improving pastures. And those are some of the things that Kim did speak of earlier that were originally covered under the route program and are also covered under the ARDAR CFG, sorry, the ARDAR off-calf program, keeping in mind that there are nuances to each program and some of them have different eligible expenses. So I'm just going to quickly go over the eligible expenses for the CFGA application. And this year, the implementation limit went up to $100,000 for CFGA. So if you have already applied under the off-calf program, which the maximum was 75, has been moved up to 100,000. There still are dollars available for producers who are looking to do some more implementation. As well, you cannot use dollars for same land that has already undertaken an off-calf project. So in terms of eligible fencing expenses, it's new material, can be wildlife-friendly fencing, temporary fencing, energizers, and your own personal in-kind labor and equipment use based hopefully on the Saskatchewan Custom Rate Guide, because Alberta hasn't put one out in a number of years. So we always get the question about this. You do have to have receipts that match the name on the application, and these expenses are covered at 70%. For water systems, they'll cover livestock waters and remote watering systems, which are part of a rotational grazing plan. So you can't come in and say, oh, well, I just need water, because that is not covering those BMPs that we are looking to cover, which is the carbon sequestration and those other pieces with keeping the animals rotating through on a regular basis. They will cover wet wells and pipelines and trenching of water lines, but not water source development, such as wells or dugouts. Those are covered under a different SCAP program through the provincial government. They will also look at winter remote systems that can also serve the purpose of watering during the summer grazing seasons, and they may be eligible. Some of those are looked at on a per case basis. The other thing is your water lines do not have to be trenched in. They can be surface pipelines in this case. In terms of eligible pasture improvement, pastures that are currently sitting at less than a 25% legume content are eligible for improvement. Seed and seeding costs are covered, but we do not cover inoculant, spray, or fertilizer. The tags need to be provided, verifying certified or common number 1 seed. And in-kind seeding costs, again, would be based on the provincial custom rate guide and available for that. We do have a lot of questions in this case about, well, can I take an annual field and put it into perennials? And the CFGA program is looking to improve current pasture content, not doing annual crop conversion. So I know that the route program did allow that earlier in the year, but that's not covered under CFGA. If you are looking at taking a hayfield and adding legumes to it for the purpose of grazing, that would be covered as long as it is grazed in the year that it is being seeded. So some producers, that works all right if they're looking to go in and graze and then seed. Some of the seeding costs that are covered, we can go in and do some drone seeding if that works in your area and is applicable for your operation. So just to let you know, for 2024 to 2025, you can kind of see that we had across the country, we had over $30 million worth of requests for programming, but we only had $12 million worth of funding available to give out. So you can see where that Alberta did have quite a lot of the value of the funding that went out. We originally had a request for 6 million, and we were able to, get $3 million worth of funding out the door. And I'm going to stop there with program questions because the rest of the presentation I have here actually talks about rotational grazing in general. And I don't know if there's any questions, but I will stop there and let people ask if there are.
Currently, there does not look to be any questions.
No problem. What I will do is I will put my email address in the chat so that if you do have any questions, feel free to give me a shout and I will do my best to get those questions answered. And again, the window for applications for the CFGA it opened April 1st and will be closing on April 30th to start the review of the projects. And then once that, if we do not expend all the dollars and based on the current applications we have in the system, again, it's not first come, first serve. It is the best projects that are getting the funding going forward.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia. Last but not least, I'd like to get Giselle Erlerich to present. Giselle grew up on a mixed farm in East Central Saskatchewan, where she eventually received a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Saskatchewan with a major in agronomy. Giselle has now worked for Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation since July 2022, and she currently supports the Resilient Agriculture Landscape Program and the On-Farm Efficiency Program under the Sustainable CAP. Her focus area is extension and communications. Thank you, Giselle. The floor is yours.
Yep. I will just share my screen here. Can you see it, okay?
Yes.
Okay. There's a way for me to hide this. There we go. Okay. So thank you for letting me join today. So I'm going to talk about the On-Farm Efficiency Program. So this program was created by combining the past Farm Technology Program and Efficient Grain Handling Program, along with some new opportunities that were selected in response to feedback that was collected during engagement in the fall of 2023. So the program opened for the first time to applications on August 14th, 2024. We recently opened for applications on April 3rd of this year, but we have already been fully subscribed. So we are currently closed, but we are expected to reopen to applications in April of 2026. So my presentation will probably be relatively brief today, just kind of focusing on the main points. I don't want to get too much into details in case there are any changes before the next window next year. So the objective of OFEP is to support producers in achieving environmental benefits by improving the efficient use of agricultural inputs such as fertilizer, seed, and energy. So of course, when you are more precise with your inputs, it is sort of a win-win for both farmers and the environment. You save money. You're not wasting inputs by applying them off target. And of course, there are fewer emissions released to the atmosphere by being more efficient as well. So for eligibility, we have primary producers responsible for management of an agricultural operation in Alberta. that produces at least $25,000 worth of farm commodities annually, as well as approved Indigenous applicants. And for this program, all applicants must have a current environmental farm plan, or they need to obtain one to submit with their final report in order to get paid. So you don't need one when you apply, but you will need one to receive payment. On the funding list, we have 4 different funding streams or categories. So we have smart farm technology, energy efficiency, farm security, and efficient grain handling. I would encourage you to review the funding list on the website for the most up-to-date list of eligible and ineligible items. I think currently we have about 45 eligible items on the list, so hopefully there's something there for everyone. So the program is retroactive to April 1st, 2023, which is when Sustainable Cap launched. Grants are on a 50% cost share basis. The minimum grant is $500 per application. And the maximum grant total over the life of the program is $150,000 per applicant. So that's between 2023 and 2028. And then we also have a funding maximum per funding stream. So smart farm technology and energy efficiency both have funding maximums of $50,000. Farm security has a max of $2,000, and efficient grain handling has a max of $100,000. So these are just some examples from the funding list I'm showing here. So for the smart farm technology stream, this is funding tools for agronomic decision-making, more efficient fertilizer and seed application, for example, or livestock feed efficiency and health monitoring, or precision weed elimination. Items under this category must feature smart elements. So elements that either increase efficiency or offering data collection or automated data analysis, for example. So some examples of eligible items that we funded this year included equipment-mounted sensors, data collection and data storage units, electronic livestock ID readers, retrofit, sectional, or rate control technology, and temperature and moisture monitoring cables that are not connected to aeration fans or heated drying systems. For energy efficiency, this category covers technology that improves energy efficiency. It's pretty self-explanatory. Must be for energy sources that directly support production of an agricultural commodity. And it also must feature smart elements. So some examples of eligible items here are efficient heating systems, insulation in new builds, heat pumps, and programmable logic controls. And that is also retrofit only. For farm security, items should be technology that improves farm security and supports protection of assets. Examples include GPS equipment tags and trackers, remote monitoring for fixed cameras, and motion detectors. And then last, we have efficient grain handling. So these are for system components that significantly improve energy efficiency above standard configurations. So standard equipment will not be covered in this category. So we're talking about items like high efficiency burners, variable speed drives, or variable frequency drives, and then temperature and moisture monitoring cables that are connected to aeration fans or heated drying systems would fall under this category. So those are just a couple examples. There's many more in the funding list. So certainly encourage you to look at the full list. And then here we have the OFEP resources. So on our website, you will find our full funding list, program terms and conditions, some sample application forms, and grant approvals for reference. I also have the Sustainable Cap website here. If you go to that website and scroll to the bottom, there's a section where you can sign up for email updates. And so basically what that means is that when OFEP does open again to applications last year, if you're signed up for updates, you would get an email saying, hi, we've reopened today. So you would know right away. We also have a program email if you want to ask program staff a question directly, that is your best option. And then 310 Farm is also available for general program questions or if you want to be redirected to the program team. So that's it. Like I said, I kept it kind of short and sweet just because we are in between intakes right now, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Giselle. I really wanted to push this one out there, even though it is closed, just because of how quickly it closed. So, you know, it's competitive, and it is a very good program for some of those things that aren't always available for funding, especially security or handling technology, those things. I think it's a good one to kind of get the word out for. So, thank you for giving that brief presentation on it.
Thank you for letting me come in today.
There doesn't look to be any questions.
Hi, Jose. Could I ask a question here
Oh,
with that?
absolutely.
Sorry, I wasn't quite able to type it fast enough with that there. I just had a question there for Giselle of do you have any suggestions with how fast the program was fully allocated there going into say 2026, suggestions for producers who might be putting together an application of like what to have put together beforehand to be able to make a quick and efficient application?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think to your point, we did fully subscribe very fast this year. I think it caught us by surprise a little bit. So I would say so on the website, so it is possible our application forms could change. So the one we have on there right now has got a sample watermark on it, but I think even this year there were maybe a few minor tweaks, but it was mostly the same. So I would say use the documents on the website. That's going to provide a pretty good guide for what kind of information we're going to need. And then I would say next year, we're probably planning to reopen like April 1st. I would just make sure you have all your information ready to go right away so that you can apply like as soon as possible when we open. I'd encourage you to subscribe for email updates so you get an email as soon as we open. And yeah, just get it in right away. And if there's information you're not sure about, like we would never reject an application without asking some questions. Right. So if you're not sure, fill it out as best you can and just get it in as soon as you can. Because yeah, we have been selling out really fast. So I don't really have a better piece of advice than just try to submit as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, that's all good. That's some good tips there on reviewing the application sheet that's available and things like that. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So as you can see on the Alberta website there on the on-farm efficiency program, it's saying that like it's closed now, but it will reopen. There is the section down here, the application form. So application guide. And that's like a start. And then when the new one gets up, you could always use it to compare to the new one if you're looking for it. So it is on the SCAP website under sustainable agriculture on farm efficiency. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank you all for attending the webinar. I hope that by gathering information on these programs, it was kind of valuable for you to kind of see all the different programs, all the different availabilities. And be sure to check out our website for upcoming events for future extension or even the research that's on the way. Thank you again for attending, and thank you to our speakers, Christy, Sonia, Giselle, Kim, and then I know Quinn had to leave, but her as well. Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for your time.